This is our fourth and final message of the series, All the Feels. If you hadn't had a chance to watch the other videos, tune in, or you can watch them on our podcast too. This week's message is about fear.
Hi, it's so good to be with you, and it's a real honour to be able to make a contribution to this series on All the Feels. And I'm going to share a little bit about managing fear. My life has certainly been made richer through the influence of mentors, people who have shared from their experiences, extensive research, face-to-face, sometimes reading books, listening to podcasts, but a number of men and women have had a real contribution in specific areas. It might be Eugene Peterson in the area of pastoral ministry, or people who have helped me in the area of prayer. But when it comes to the area of fear, and we all have to wrestle with fear, it's part of being human, one person who has been very helpful, and it might surprise some of you if you know the person, and his name is Laird Hamilton. He'd be about 57 now, an American big wave surfer. And he has ridden some of the biggest waves ever at places like Jaws in Hawaii and Chopu in Tahiti. And it's interesting, apart from this amazing specimen of a man and all of his courage, when he's interviewed about Laird, how do you prepare yourself to ride a 10 metre, 20 metre wave? And if you go to Google and research the millennial or the millennium wave, it is the most hideous rogue wave ever ridden. And when Laird talks about fear, he's not some alpha male infused with adrenaline and he's reckless. He has learnt to respect the ocean, and he's also learned to respect the feeling of fear. He has learned over the years to manage fear, to actually have a relationship with fear. That was news to me as one who tried to avoid fear in any situation that has potential to provoke adrenaline and cortisol saturating my body. So let's start with, to fear is to be human. If you're afraid of something or someone, welcome to humanity. It's something we all experience at different times, different levels, but to feel fear doesn't mean you're weak, it doesn't mean you're crazy, and it certainly doesn't mean you are unspiritual. You can be filled with the Spirit of God and at the same time feel fear. So it's probably not surprising that when you look at Genesis and that first response to an awareness of sin, when God approached Adam and Eve in the cool of the garden, we read that Adam and Eve hid from God. And when God asked, "Where are you? Why are you hiding?" This is what Adam said: "I heard you in the garden and I was afraid." This first understanding, this first experience of fear. Let me say something about fear. Fear can save us, and it can also enslave us. Fear is not a bad emotion, it's not negative. At times it's just uncomfortable. But let's look at a time when fear might save you, and this is a God-given emotion for us. Say it's a very hot summer's day, and you think, I'm going to go to Scarborough Beach. I just want to cool down and just bathe in the ocean. So you drive to Scarborough Beach. It's such a hot day. And as you arrive, you notice there's not many people on the beach because the beach is closed. There is a huge swell, rips everywhere, and there are signs all over the beach saying beach closed. You notice there are a couple of surfers and you think, I'm just going to go for 10 minutes. And you don't see any lifesavers, lifeguards there, and you put your feet in the water and there's this uncomfortable feeling called fear, and it's having a conversation with you. It's getting your attention. Don't go in. In that moment, fear has saved you. But how many of us are aware of those times where fear, it doesn't so much saves us, it enslaves us. It becomes toxic. It becomes something that actually paralyzes and intimidates us. Fear at that point can be an overreactor. Again, it's still adrenaline and cortisol. It's that uncomfortable feeling, but it's not so much of a warning about danger. It exaggerates. It's way over the top. It probably goes back to a point in your life where something happened, you experience fear, and now fear is a memory of danger, or fear is a memory of a perceived danger. So let me give you an example. I was probably 6, 7 years old at school, and it was one of those times the teacher said, we're all going to read. And so we read from a book, and I was sitting at the back of the class because that was part of my strategy of hiding because of fear. And I still remember everyone, from the front to the back, we all had to read a paragraph. And so being in the back row, I had plenty of time to really sweat it out. And when it came to my time, that first moment of speaking aloud in public, in front of all my peers, I missed lines, I reread lines, there were words I couldn't pronounce, I stuttered and stumbled, I could hear giggling and laughing, I could feel fear and the relief when it was all over. But I knew it's not all over, it's going to happen again and again. And every time the teacher said, we're going to read, what I would then do, I would count how many people before me. There might be 25, and then I would go through the 26th paragraph and rehearse it, because if I could at least rehearse it and make sure I say it well, but then some girl would read 2 paragraphs, and so I'd have a paragraph I haven't rehearsed, and all over again, this voice and this feeling that is very unpleasant and uncomfortable. So it was a voice, it was happening in my head, but predominantly fear is something we feel in our body. So what are you putting off in your life because of fear? Because I'm sure for a lot of us, when we've had several experiences and there's a pattern, we feel this is something I'm going to have to live with. I'm stuck with this unmanageable fear. The good news is fear can be managed. Laird Hamilton, this great, amazing big wave surfer, he feels fear, but it doesn't enslave him. It just gives him perspective. So I'm going to share 3 things with you about how we as a community, not just me on my own, but we as a community, we can manage fear. The first point, and this might be a little surprise to some of you, is we need to lean into fear. To fear is to be human. Everyone is afraid of something and someone. Think for a moment of the predominant thing that causes fear. Usually at the top of the list, the top 2 would be death and public speaking. So what I experienced as a child is nothing new. It's very common. But other areas in the top 3 would be the fear of failure, the fear of making a mistake, trying something, dropping a catch. It could be missing a goal. It might be starting a business and it just falls flat and you lose money. And that sense of the humiliation, the regret, the what will people say. And for others, another common cause or trigger of fear is the unknown. What's tomorrow? As parents, the fear for our children. Can you remember teaching your children how to ride a bike? And it was like, oh my goodness, and they've got to fall. But it goes to another level when you teach them how to drive a car. And you do a few lessons in a large car park, but at some point you've got to go on the main road. They eventually get their license, and it's the fear of them going off without your supervision. It's common. What do you do as we look at leaning into fear? What do you normally do with fear? Because one strategy is avoidance. It works, it's just ineffective in that it doesn't help you, it actually reinforces that sense of that humiliation, that what this isn't right. I'm avoiding things I love, but because there's fear, I stop doing it. So if you have a fear of flying, maybe you had a bad experience, okay, just don't fly again. If you want to go to Sydney, you've just got to drive or get on a bus. You have a fear of escalators or lifts, okay, well, you just take the stairs. You have a fear of public speaking like I did as a child, well, that's fine. You just say no if there's an opportunity to speak. But I want you to imagine for a moment, rather than avoiding, denying, repressing, feel the fear. Lean into the fear and actually have a relationship. You don't have to be besties, but actually get to know this feeling called fear. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but feel it, maybe express it to someone, and then see that potentially as you lean into fear and it becomes an emotion you become familiar with, maybe fear can be a catalyst of something new and transformative. Where do you feel your fear normally? Some people talk, oh, it's in my gut. It's that uncomfortable feeling of butterflies. For others, oh no, it's more in my chest, my heart. It's pounding, or I feel a tightness in my jaw, my shoulders, or wherever it is, or my hands are shaking, or I'm sweating profusely. There's so many ways, but to lean into fear, to feel it, just for 15 seconds, feel the fear. Where is it? It's to be felt. Don't ignore it. Don't deny it. Lean into fear. Take 15 seconds when you're confronted with something, when you're about to do something, you're about to go to the doctor, the dentist, you're about to give a speech, you're going to start a new business, whatever it is, feel the fear, 15 seconds. Now lean into curiosity. Here's a question. Up until now, how has fear been serving you? Does it restrict? Does it imprison? Is it ruling your life and almost ruining your life? How is it serving? Think about the times where fear has consumed and hindered and paralyzed you. What is the memory that has been provoked? Remember, fear at times is a memory of danger. Go back to that time, and I go back to that first time of reading and making mistakes and stuttering and not being able to pronounce words and just, oh no, what will people think? Think about your relationship with fear. Lean into that curiosity. What have I learnt about myself? What have I learned about Rob Mason, this kid in primary school, insecure, shy, and almost on public display, and the sense of the humiliation of making a mistake? You might be thinking, okay, lean into curiosity. You're asking a lot of questions, but that's curiosity. That's what a mentor does. A mentor asks questions that stir us and give us a sense of awareness. So rather than overreacting or reacting in a negative way, we respond, we ask ourselves questions. Here's a very important question when it comes to leaning into curiosity. What is on the other side of fear? This fear that I've lent into, that I'm feeling, 15 seconds go by, okay, I'm now leaning into curiosity. Think about what is on the other side of fear. I had a fear of public speaking because I stuttered, I tried to read fast because I was nervous, I missed my place, I couldn't say certain words. At the age of 16, my local Church of Christ pastor said, Rob, I'm going to preach in a few weeks and I would like you to preach 1 point, 5 minutes. Would you do it? My first response, oh, run, Rob, run. Don't say yes. And for some reason, I said yes. I felt the fear, I could remember all of these experiences, but there was this sense I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I realized on the other side of fear was an opportunity to enter into the very early days of a calling to be a preacher, to be a communicator. On the other side of fear was an opportunity to break a pattern. That 5-minute mini message within a message went really well. I got good feedback from my family, from the minister, and there was this relief of, but it was more than I spoke well. There was this sense of this curiosity of, I think there might be more preaching. When my wife and I left the church that I was pastoring as a youth pastor, we had about a year where we sensed God was calling us to start a church. And all those fears of, but what will people think? What if you make a mistake? It's going to be very public. I won't have a senior pastor to hide behind. And yet there was a stirring of the Spirit of God. The fear I was feeling, but what was on the other side of fear was a church that we pastored for about 23 years. Going through about 10 years of anxiety and panic attacks, what was on the other side of all of that fear and all that mayhem and all of that humiliation of having panic attacks in public places? Well, on the other side of fear, because I allowed it, there was a book. So what about you? What's on the other side of the fear that you're experiencing right now? Maybe you need to have an awkward conversation with someone. You might have to confront them. It could be a child, a spouse, a friend. I need to have a conversation. I want to avoid it. You feel the fear. You have this curiosity. What's on the other side? Could it be that on the other side of this fear is reconciliation, forgiveness? But let's be real. I've given all these positive examples, but what if on the other side of fear, there is something really difficult to manage? What if you notice a mole on your body has changed? What if you notice a lump? You feel the fear, you lean into it, you're leaning into curiosity. But what if I go to the doctor and there's not a good report? What if on the other side is a bad report? Let me say a couple of things into that, because that's a fair question. It's better to deal with that mole or that lump now rather than avoid it and deny it for a year or two, where you finally have to go to the doctor and you hear the words, "I wish you came earlier." But even more so, what is on the other side of fear? It's Jesus. Jesus is on this side. He's with you in your fear as you lean into fear. As you lean into curiosity, Jesus is part of this conversation, but Jesus is on the other side of fear. Lean into fear. Feel it. 15 seconds. Lean into curiosity. What is on the other side of fear? What's happening in my world? What is Jesus saying? What is Jesus doing? He's on the other side. 15 seconds, a minute or two. Now, lean into Jesus. I want us to go to a garden the night before Jesus was crucified. It's called the Garden of Gethsemane. There's a lot of olive trees. The understanding of this word Gethsemane, it's like this oil press. This is a place where oil is pressed for Jesus. This is a place where there will be such anguish and torment, including fear, that this sense of this life, this anointing is going to be poured out. Jesus felt sorrow, anguish. He didn't just feel it, including fear. Some scholars struggle with that, but of course Jesus, in his humanity, felt fear. But he then said it. He expressed his fear to the disciples. Matthew 26, verse 38. My soul is anguished with sorrow to the point of death. I don't know about you, but when I've had issues with reading, or I've got caught in a rip and had a bit of a panic attack, I've never experienced that level of anguish and torment, sorrow and fear. Dr. Luke says a little bit more in Luke chapter 22, verse 44. As Jesus was praying in the garden, feeling this anguish, it was like he was sweating droplets of blood. It's falling to the ground. Such is the anguish and the torment he's experiencing. Then notice this, he feels the fear. Now he has a conversation with the Father. Matthew 26:39. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not my will, but as you will. In other words, Jesus is now leaning into curiosity. Father, is there another way of doing this? Is it possible to take this suffering, this fear from me? But I see on the other side of fear, on the other side of the cross, and all of the anguish I will experience, all of the physical, emotional, and spiritual anguish I will experience on the other side of the cross is a resurrection. On the other side of fear, on the other side of the cross, is redemption for humanity. Lean into Jesus. As you experience fear, as we learn to manage our fear, we lean into fear, we feel it, we lean into curiosity. What's on the other side? And as we lean into Jesus, Jesus, you know fear. What are you doing? What are you saying? Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the Father. We look to Jesus. We fix our eyes on Jesus. We lean into Jesus. Not only is he the pioneer of faith, he's the pioneer of doing things afraid. Despite his fear, he endured the cross. He is a pioneer. He's going into an area no one has gone before. He is inviting us. Lean into me. Follow me. And whatever that challenge is, together, let's do it afraid. Jesus isn't afraid, but he is with us as we cross over into the unknown, into the unfamiliar, into an area that has potential to cause pain, different expressions or manifestations of discomfort. But there's a sense of there is something redemptive on the other side. So let's make this declaration. Fear is not going to rule my life any longer. In the name of Jesus, whatever you call me to do, I will do it afraid. Lean into fear. Feel it. 15 seconds. Now lean into curiosity. What's going on? Where are you feeling this fear? What is on the other side of fear? Another 15, 30 seconds. Now lean into Jesus. Stay there. Stay. Lean into Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. God bless you.